Despite lingering popular misconceptions, the Great Lakes and Upper Midwest region is not an economic monolith of struggling older industrial cities and rural hinterlands. Many communities have shed their agricultural and industrial shells and found new economic success in a globalized, knowledge and technology-driven economy. So writes our guest for this program, Paths to Renewed Prosperity for Great Lakes Communities. Hello and welcome to the Jefferson Educational Society's digital programming. I'm Ben Speggen and I'm the Vice President at the Jefferson and am a contributing editor at the Erie Reader. And my guest for this conversation is Mr. John Austin. Now, Mr. Austin is the author of A Vital Midwest, The Path to New Prosperity, and will share his findings from that 2020 report from which the Chicago Council on Global Affairs has provided fresh analysis of the Great Lakes economy and the varied paths by which the region's older industrial communities, similarly situated to Erie, have turned an economic corner. Mr. Austin will also discuss the new challenges and opportunities for economic growth in a COVID-19 reshaped economy. That report, A Vital Midwest, The Path to New Prosperity, is available for download at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs website, thechicagocouncil.org. Now, a quick note on Mr. Austin. He directs the Michigan Economic Center, a center for ideas and network building to advance Michigan's economic transformation. He also serves as a non-resident senior fellow with the Chicago Council on Global Affairs and the Brookings Institution. And he is a research fellow with the W.E. Upjohn Institute for Employment Research, supporting these organizations' work to accelerate economic transformation in the American Midwest. Mr. Austin also has 16 years of elected service on the Michigan State Board of Education, serving 6 years as its president and giving lectures on the economy at the University of Michigan. He received his master's degree in public administration from Harvard's John F. Kennedy School of Government and his bachelor's degree in economics and political science with high honors and Phi Beta Kappa from Swarthmore College. Now, folks, since this conversation is first airing live on the Jefferson's Facebook page, we'll work our way through as many questions from you, the viewers, as we can as we host this event. If you have a question, just leave it in the comment section below. If you are listening to or watching a later broadcast of this event, please do feel free to still send us your questions and comments, and we'll get them along to Mr. Austin as best we can to keep the dialogue moving, to keep this conversation going. And for more information about both past and upcoming Jefferson Educational Society programs and publications, please visit jeserie.org and be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Mr. John Austin, thank you for joining me for this conversation.
Oh, my pleasure, Ben. Nice to be with you and your viewers.
So we're so happy to have you. And as we dive into this, let's really start at the beginning. You've been both studying and working to improve the economy of the industrial Great Lakes region for some time now. How did you get into this work and why? What drew you here?
Well, I think I came to it pretty early and honestly. My father was from Cleveland, my mother from Philadelphia, but I grew up in the coal fields in West Virginia. He was a clergyman, and like a lot of earnest young clergymen, was trying to make a difference during that war on poverty era in a part of the world, that's got tremendous challenges economically. The coal industry, even then, 30, 40 years ago, was not what it, once was. And so a lot of struggle, a lot of strife. And I was always looking around at what could we do? What can one do to create new round of economic opportunity in a place like this? And I took an economics course in high school that just lit it up and said, this like rules the world. One of my classmates, in fact, was a woman, Lael Brainerd, who is now on the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. She went on to become a real economist, but we both kind of got the bug. Like, it's important. It shapes people's life chances touch the economy, and that's what I studied in college in public policy, then on at the Kennedy School of Government. What can countries do? What can states do? What can local leaders do? What can public policy do to accelerate economic evolution and development? And had a good fortune right out of college. I worked for then Governor Mike Dukakis, who showed me what a governor could do to really focus all the tools that a governor has on the parts of Massachusetts that weren't part of the Massachusetts miracle, the old mill towns and manufacturing communities, the Lowell, the Lawrences. Then I married into Michigan, and 30 plus years ago, moved out here and began to work first in Flint on local economic development and education, and then more statewide, and had my finger in sort of everything we've been trying to do in Michigan around evolving our economy and our priorities, whether it's infrastructure, higher education attainment, or developing leadership in some new innovative blue economies, one of my babies. But then about 15 years ago, I had the good fortune to be on some trips with Court Gould, who I think is now at your Erie Foundation. He was then in Pittsburgh. Leaders from Pittsburgh and Cleveland and Milwaukee and other Midwest Rust Belt cities. We went to Europe to look at analogs. What are older industrial cities in Europe? What do they do to try to evolve their economies? And two things hit us. One was the Europeans kind of talk a big game and they put a bigger geography on the wall and say, how do we grow the axis of development in the Barcelona to Kiev, which is less developed, in London to Milan. But mostly what happened is we talked to each other, these leaders from business and government in our Midwest communities. We just began to appreciate we have so much, we're so similar in what we're trying to do, what strengths we're trying to leverage, and what challenges we're trying to overcome. And it hit all of us. Is there like a shared kind of economic development storyline to this Great Lakes region? And I think then in 2016, under the Brookings banner, we did the first kind of hard look at, yes, there is kind of a shared economic development trajectory from this region that was the agro and then industrial manufacturing kind of cockpit of America, from Buffalo and Western New York and Western Pennsylvania west, all the way through to the Mississippi River Valley and all around the Great Lakes and down to the Ohio River watershed. That really is the great industrial centerpiece of America. And that story we first told some years ago and laid it out as an agenda and what could be helpful to accelerate economic change in this region for its people.
Well, and John, you've certainly picked up many shovels to get to work on this economic development, from your relationship with the Brookings to the Updike Institute to your work in Michigan. So clearly you've been at this a while. And so tell us about what you began to see and share starting 20 years ago when you were taking a look at this, the unique economy and cultural development really around the Rust Belt, as we refer to the region.
And 20 years ago, what we saw and what we really painted in the report, the Vital Center report, unlike the Bourne Ultimatum series, everything's a vital. The latest is the Vital Midwest. But yes, there is a shared kind of economic development storyline and arc of this region. And it was, how did that come about? Well, tremendous raw materials and resources were here. And as it was settled, they began to get exploited. I mean, the iron ores, the timbers, the richest farmland on earth. Oil was discovered in Western Pennsylvania. So people flooded in, both the farmers and the timberers and the oil extractors, and this region grew. And then it began to convert all of this raw material and bounty, and entrepreneurs and tinkerers began to create all the major great industries that powered America in the 20th century: the oil industry, the auto industry, the steel industry, the chemical industry, the aviation industry was born in Ohio. I mean, on and on. The retail sales industry came out of Chicago. So this region, and then it attracted all these people from around the world, and the great migration from the south to these industrial cities, small and large, and food processing centers. Many of them had to be on the water, the mills, and then the factories. To our Great Lakes and our rivers became lined with manufacturing and food processing and milling and complexes of all sorts. And that is the story of the in-migration of people, bringing their culture from Eastern and Northern Europe, from the South. I grew up in West Virginia. I never heard so many West Virginia accents as when I landed in Fenton, Michigan, outside of Flint, because all these folks flocked up here to get good jobs in our machine shops, our mills, our mines. And that really was our story through the 50s, 60s, and 70s. As we know, the incredible opening to global competition, restructuring of these great industries, a lot of shrinkage and contraction as other people picked up pieces of that and could do it cheaper or better. But even industries like the auto industry, under competitive pressure, almost died, but came back, but it just employs fewer and fewer people. So we looked at hard in 2006, where are we at that time in this region? What are our strengths? Amazing strengths still. We built the biggest, baddest network of colleges and big scale research universities, which are innovation engines on earth. 20 of the top 200 global ranked universities are in this Great Lakes Midwest region, which is more than the West Coast, East Coast, any place. Amazing natural assets. I mean, look at the 10,000 miles of freshwater coast on the Great Lakes, and lots of woods and parks and farmlands and outdoors. That's a real boon in a time now when lifestyle and having quality of life are important. We have amazing, innovation coming out of our companies that play globally. And one example I love to use: Procter and Gamble on the Ohio River grew out of a city that chopped up pigs, and made soap. And then these great global enterprises were born that play at scale. But we also have really unique, those really matter today in today's economy. The talent generation comes out of our colleges and universities when talent's the realm. But our legacy of development left us uniquely big deficits. The oldest battered infrastructure. Population in most parts of the region 20 years ago that was not educated. You only needed a high school diploma to get a good paying job. We have the most balkanized and segregated metropolitan regions, the most segregated by race. 15 of the top segregated by race communities are in our region, these industrial cities of the north. We also have amazing innovation coming out of our companies and universities and entrepreneurs, but the capital, our wealth, we actually export our pension fund and university endowments. They go to fund venture capital on the coast, not in the region. And many of our great inventions go and get made into new industries on the coast. So we don't have that benefit. So 15 years ago, lots of strength to leverage, lots of unique deficits to fill. And we went about encouraging the feds and states to work on some of those, made some headway, but now it's a new picture today.
And I wanted to follow up on that, and perhaps that's something we'll get into a little bit later. The idea of still, when people think of development and even the tech economies, largely concentrated to the coasts. And when we're seeing so much attention being paid to either the coasts, but here you are talking about the educational resources, the institutional power, and the economic power of the Rust Belt. And when we think of that as a region, I think that takes on that negative connotation when we call it a Rust Belt. You mentioned blue economy, and I've heard it called Blue Belt. I've also heard Chrome Belt. Is there a case to rename the region as a new identity is emerging? Should we look to capitalize on that, or just continue to move forward with this idea that we are what we are the Rust Belt? What's in a name?
The Economist recently did a feature on the Midwest, because everyone today, particularly since 2016, is around the world is fascinated with what's going on in that region that gave us Donald Trump as president. And so I again kind of was laying out the truth that we have amazing innovation horsepower, pretty unrivaled, to be the leader in all the emerging sectors in our companies, universities. But we can be the brain belt, is what they put on their headline. But we've got to leverage those engines of innovation and new opportunity and translate them into the new products, new technologies that are located and baked here. Let me say, 20 years ago, as we updated this picture in the Vital Midwest, the report that you nicely pitched at the beginning of the show, the picture today is very different, and it's evolved from 15 years ago. There really are two Midwests pre-pandemic, meaning most of the major metros in an economy then where it was, congregating in the bigger city regions, the knowledge economy, from Minneapolis in the west, which long ago became more diverse and prosperous. It was no longer the flour milling capital of the world, to Pittsburgh to your east. Who'd have thought Pittsburgh, the collapse of the steel industry, the outmigration of talent, reversed on the backs of really the great universities, Carnegie Mellon and UPitt, and AI and robotics, and a whole new medical, and other sectors that are growing and attracting now young professionals, kind of a hip place, clean up the mess on the river, have a sparkling, city. So the major metros were all beginning to evolve. Indianapolis, Columbus, diverse, thriving. The university towns, a major researcher teaching university is they're good. They were kicking it. I'm in Ann Arbor right now. State College is a thriving, university-spun, mid-sized city. All the university towns, which we're blessed by having more than anybody. I mean, South Bend, Indiana, had evolved after losing 30 or 40,000 jobs from its signature employer, and probably is doing better. Mayor Pete, who knows, might have had something to do with it, because Notre Dame is there. So, but the real interesting part is, so it isn't a Rust Belt. Lots of our communities had been kind of kicking it in a globalized, tech-driven, knowledge-driven economy. the thing that we began to focus on, and in the report, whether the small and medium-sized factory towns, we had more of those in the region than any place in the country, just the pattern of development, a dense network of small and medium and big-sized factory and manufacturing communities. Many have lost their anchors and not found a way to replace all that economic activity. Some have found ways and leveraged certain assets or made a path to new economic success in a very changed economy. And that's the kind of the different success paths for different communities that are similarly situated. Factory manufacturing hubs or food processing hubs that maybe lost their big anchors. What have some of them done to find a new place and find new economic vitality in a changed world?
And I want to get to, what you're seeing that they're doing that has changed and is breeding success. But I can't help but ask, in politics aside, the 2016 election, you noted that the election of President Donald Trump has now shined the spotlight on the Midwest, on the Rust Belt. Is this a welcomed attention? Because it seems as if it's a region that had not been receiving the due attention and due research, other than what you're doing and pushing out, but not the mega amount of attention that is now getting. Is that a welcomed pressure? Is that a welcomed spotlight now to be able to focus on this region? Is it helpful, hurtful? What's that look like, the impact of the 2016 election, politics aside?
When we first laid out this kind of blueprint under Brookings for Great Lakes, rejuvenation, it was really only us in the region that cared. The rest of the nation could care less about our prospects in Midwest or in Rust Belt to evolve our economy for a brighter future. Right. Now, the election brought the whole nation and world, literally. I've fielded more calls and interviews with international reporters in the last couple of years than one of the few seemingly, oracles of the Midwest economy that's out there. But that attention is good if it's about, okay, what can we do and how do we help as a nation, as a country, accelerate economic change in regions that are going through this painful period of restructuring? What can we do to accelerate and rejuvenate and create a new round of economic opportunity for the people and the places that used to do one thing and were doing pretty well, but that's gone. And now, because that is where kind of the anxiety and the anxiousness and the real nostalgia. I mean, I cut my teeth in Michigan, in Flint. There is amazing nostalgia for the couple generations of kind of workers paradise, in a community that was sparkling and thriving and busy. And so when you watch and see that disappear, when the young people are gone, when your life and your community isn't what it used to be, that's the folks who are, the ones who responded to Donald Trump and may again, and because he's promising to bring back the days of the past, and maybe it's immigrants or somebody else who's getting theirs and you're not getting yours, which is blowing up kind of the politics of our own country. I view as destructive, but the issue for me is when you provide new opportunity, when you can help folks create conditions in communities where the economy is providing good jobs. Folks are optimistic and forward-looking. They're less prone to, less intolerant of other people who aren't like them. And so that's a good reason to welcome the attention on what are the success paths for places that are, help them move from an old economy to success in a new economy.
And I like that framing of old economy and new economy, because I feel like we hear all too often just post-industrial, and that's such a big, heady concept to wrap arms around of what does it mean to be post-industrial. And even like in a place like Erie, where manufacturing, in particular advanced manufacturing, still plays a vital role in our overall economy, it's tough to reconcile that. And before we get to what communities are doing differently that we can observe and see thanks to your report, I do want to take one of the audience questions here, because I think it talks about some change, but it uses a constant in water. And you already mentioned blue economy, and this person's saying we in Erie are a part of a select group of cities that cherish being the beneficiary of and also the role of stewards of freshwater lake. We see Toledo, Ohio creating a Lake Erie Bill of Rights, which this person thinks is thinking of modeling. Erie is thinking of modeling. What do you see other cities doing to preserve and defend Great Lakes resources, particularly its water? We can change a lot about ourselves, but we can't change our location. We're fixed here. We're on Great Lakes.
And I like this. It's a beautiful freshwater coast. And people want to live, work, and play near coast. If you clean up the detritus from the industrial economy and reconnect communities to water and waterfronts, and I do not underestimate the power of this to drive local economic revitalization. Great examples all around the Great Lakes, and Erie's blessed to be on a Great Lake. Where Marquette, I was just up in Marquette, Michigan, is a great example. It was an industrial port. The iron ores came over. A beautiful historic city, great buildings, great bones, great outdoor lifestyle, though it's cold as hell up there, but skiing and snowshoeing and really great bones of a town. They very purposely in that city over the years, as the oil barrels and the flag heaps and even the piers themselves on their beautiful Lake Superior waterfront became redundant. The city took them over, cleaned them up, made one into a new park, made one into a new marina, sold off some to the private sector. There are condominiums now overlooking Lake Superior that sold for $350,000 a few years ago. They're now cost $500,000. There's new hotel development, sort of an integrated multi-use waterfront that makes Marquette. Now Marquette is attracting professionals who want to live and work because they wired the whole place. High-speed broadband and a lot of the UP. So professionals may be accelerated by COVID who can live and work and play in the world. When they choose to make their living at home as a small university as well, that's an asset. Then, that's the real power of being on the water is when people choose that because it's a great lifestyle community. And you see that Ashtabula down the road from you all, Great Lakes cleanup money helped redevelop that waterfront. It's now got a little more economic activity as a place to be. You go across to Duluth, you go any place on a Great Lake has an opportunity to leverage this natural asset, which is unrivaled on Earth. It's beautiful.
It is, and in Erie, we're blessed to have Presque Isle. We have 13 miles of freshwater beaches that folks can enjoy, a gem of a state park that people can access. We see tourism being an important part of our economy, but we do see that economic shift. We see what change is happening in Erie. Our county's largest employer now is Erie Insurance, had been for years rooted in manufacturing with GE Transportation and then Wabtec. We see that change. We see the rise of both meds and eds in Erie as well. So we see hospitals growing, we see the universities growing as well. What changes are you witnessing throughout this region that are driving success more quickly when it comes to embracing a new identity and charting a new path that isn't rooted in that industrial idea of what we used to be, but what we are and what we can be?
This is what we try to give examples of and kind of create some typology in the Vital Midwest report. Every community is different, even if they share kind of a older industrial heritage, right? Has different assets, has different opportunities, has different things to leverage. Not every community is on a Great Lake. The ones that are locked inland that are an older city would kill to be on that location. But so some of the communities have their anchor employers. They did stay on the cutting edge of innovation. So Columbus, Indiana is a great example. Cummins Engine, it's a company town. That community, Cummins stayed on global, hyper-efficient, clean energy engines and is killing it throughout the world. A similar community, I think Rockford, Illinois, is an advanced manufacturing community, has a lot of different employers and firms. They have a higher share of exports. They've captured a lot of global markets. They're playing in the world in advanced manufacturing capabilities like you do. Other communities mark themselves as one that's committed to talent and education and workforce development. Employers come here. Georgetown, Kentucky, not a fancy pants community in northern Kentucky. They said, we're going to organize our colleges, universities, technical training institutes to provide a skilled workforce for employers, guaranteed. Kalamazoo, Michigan, which I'll come back to because they kind of did a combo play, but one thing they did is they paid for higher education with the Kalamazoo Promise for anyone who graduated from the schools. And it was an economic development play to mark them as a community that values education, higher education. Businesses go there, people, middle-class families move back in. That's a good community revival strategy in part driven by education. Others, welcoming immigrants. We in our region need more immigrants to repopulate our communities, but also immigrants are on balance entrepreneurial and more likely to start a business, start a tech firm than we are. They're growing up here. So Fort Wayne, Troy, Michigan has the highest share of immigrants, 25%, are economically thriving communities. Hamtramck, which is nearby, It was the Polish community. It's now got 47 nationalities and is a Bangladeshi, center, and it's economically doing much better. But the real ones, the interesting, some are, finding their path in these emerging sectors, whether it's new mobility or healthcare IT or clean energy solutions or water. Milwaukee, 20 years ago, about the same time we did this first report, Milwaukee's city civic fathers and mothers said, what's our brand going forward past Harley Davidson, Deere, and they were the machine tool capital of the Midwest. I didn't know that till I learned that. But they said, maybe it's water. We have 180 water technology firms measuring, metering, smart systems. We have a beautiful location on Lake Michigan that needs to be cleaned up, and a Milwaukee River that we're cleaning up, and now it's lined through an historic downtown. And we have a water research institution. Why don't we expand that? And they did it. They said, water is our future. The blue economy is our brand. And now they're a global water center and attached an accelerator for percolating new businesses out of their research. We have medical complexes like, Rochester, Minnesota, is a world center of healthcare and IT. So we're blessed in different places. The ones that I think are most interesting are those communities that are kind of similar to the Erie. They lost some of their big anchor employers, and they didn't have a research university. They're not on a Great Lake. Kalamazoo, Grand Rapids, Green Bay's on a Great Lake, but Grand Rapids, Furniture City, Auto Parts, West Michigan. Their civic leaders over 20 years kind of ran a combination play. They redeveloped their riverfront downtown. They grew the footprint of their health and research and medical complexes out of almost nothing. They redeveloped their downtown for livable, walkable arts, culture institutions, moved parts of higher ed institutions that were out in the cornfields, Grand Valley State, into the downtown along the river. And they marked themselves, we're going to be the most sustainable community. We're going to set targets as a community. It's a business community that did this. Lower our carbon footprint, lower our water use, get people out of cars and onto public transportation. They're one of the 2030, and they were named the greenest mid-sized city in America. And young people want to go to a community and be part of a community that's committed to, sustainable practices and solving the world's problems. And they flee, the old economy, dirty. They don't want to be part of that. They want to live and work in a community like Grand Rapids. Kalamazoo, in addition to Promise, they made their downtown livable, walkable. They subsidized Bell's Brewery, if you've ever had an Oberon or a Two Hearted. And when Pfizer exploded, it was formerly Upjohn, which was founded there. 40,000 people, headquarters, vanished. They did keep a number of those bioscience talent and helped them start new biotech firms. So they kind of ran a combination play in a 100,000 person older industrial city, landlocked, where the river was so polluted that, it was toxic for years, and they buried it. There's now on burying the river. These are the different success paths. Every community has something different. Some, if you're a farming community, become a food destination, an arts, Brown County, Indiana, it's an arts and culture and mecca, because it's an artist colony, and then they attract more artists and residents, and, it's a destination. So every community's got to figure out what has it got to work with, and then how can we strategically leverage what we have in order to create a dynamic that creates a new ground of economic activity and attracts more people and provides good livelihood for the people that are there.
Well, and John, I think that's refreshing for folks in Erie to hear. One, that there is hope of a promise program being worked on now. We don't have that, but that's something being worked on. And two, the fact that Erie now has its bid for a community college has been accepted. We've been without a community college and underserved by a community college. In fact, one of the largest metro regions unserved by that, and that now is moving forward. So it seems like a lot of what you're saying is taking a look at yesterday's problems that have piled up to today's doorstep, and then applying solutions that really think about the future. Solve it today, but then also market to that future population to get people to move in. One of the things you've been focused on are the small to mid-sized metros, and I can't help but think sometimes of this underdog mentality that, it would just simply be easier if we were bigger, if we had more resources, if we were a major metro region or a large metro region. What role does size play, and how are you seeing these communities overcome that underdog mentality of, we need to be able to learn to punch above our weight class and grow a bit and be a little bolder and not just say we're not big enough to do it?
Well, the economy has been evolving for 150, for hundreds of years, from when we first were opened up, and unfortunately the native peoples here had been thriving for 3,000 years. But when we first flooded in and began to, it was farmers in small towns and villages and artisans that served them. Then the great innovation from the region was the assembly line and the mass production economy and the industrial economy. We invented it here. And so all these great industries were born, and there was a migration to cities big like Detroit's and Cleveland's and Pittsburgh's, cities smaller, Erie's and other that are dotted all over the landscape. And that's when 60% of people were working in a blue collar manufacturing environment. Now the economy's evolved. We're in a different economy. It's a knowledge economy. We're not working, with our hands in a machine shop or factory, where most of us, if you are, you're programming a robot, and there are only about a dozen of you, not the hundreds that there used to be, right? Advanced manufacturing looks very different. But we're working in hospitals and in design studios and in lawyers' offices and engineering firms and in business consultancies and in finance and all these things that has been, congregating in bigger urban, centers where we're able to enjoy seeing each other, meeting each other, walking around. We're in offices, and education institutions, not, spread out in big factories out in the cornfields anymore. So that evolution, and as I said, most of the major metros, who used to be like signature kind of one pony towns, had been evolving and getting more diverse, with Detroit and Cleveland being a little slower because they had the biggest challenges of exodus of wealth and money. But a knowledge economy, naturally emerges in the great research university and the interplay of R&D companies, universities, and entrepreneurs and money and the talent that generates all that. So pre-pandemic, it was definitely a migration towards larger metros being where most of the economic action was, as well as those talent hothouses like university towns. But the internet promised, and we saw some of it, that there are places that have some asset that makes them in such an attractive place to live and work and run your business, that people choose to be there and do their thing. As I said, we saw some of that happening already pre-pandemic. And I also say, don't underestimate the power of the environment that you're in to drive economic growth. Colorado used to be empty, horses, mining. What's changed and why it's one of the richest states and the most economically dynamic, when 50 years ago it used to be Michigan and Pennsylvania, that were the richest states. In migration of well-educated people. Why? Because it's the Rocky Mountains. I mean, it's just a great place to be. It's no one sector or anything. So wherever talent wants to be. So yes, size does matter now. In a knowledge economy where just the pattern of development is so different from what it was, years ago. So that makes attributes of place. What kind of quality of place in life? What does the fabric of your community look like? Does it provide the amenities from, multimodal transportation options to parks and outdoors, access to the outdoors and the water? Does it provide great education that, makes it be a place people want to be and stay? Does it provide support for entrepreneurs and new businesses, financing to help them start their business? I don't want to oversell the brew pubs, but they're changing markets and there's changing tastes and supporting the entrepreneurs and businesses that kind of capture those niches and making it a great place to hang out and be and live. Those are all important features of what you can do. And COVID may change it. I mean, there's silver lining maybe for our region in that, as we've learned to work and learn remotely because we've had to, it's like, why do we have to go in the office? Or maybe I don't want to be in a crazy, my son's locked down in New York City, has been for months. There's people fleeing those places. We'll see if it continues to go to a saner, safer, maybe richer quality of life and place community, of which the Eries of the world would be strong candidates.
Well, I see too, folks from, folks saying, well, I'm willing to pay the markup when it comes to my housing costs, either owning or renting, because of what being in a major metropolitan area provides me. In a pandemic, we can't do most of that. We cannot interact the way
Right.
that metros are designed to interact. So it'll be fascinating to see how that continues as we move through the pandemic. You mentioned it. You said pre-pandemic economy, and here we are still in the grips of COVID-19. What did the pandemic that we're still living through do to change the economic landscape in these Great Lakes community right now? What are you observing as we are spending 2020 moving through the pandemic? What rises to the top?
Well, and the pandemic and then a recession driven, which is driven dramatically by this pandemic, it does hit different regions differently based on the nature of their economy. Obviously, the ones dependent on travel, tourism, hospitality, the Las Vegases and the Floridas, are, but manufacturing and for production regions like us, Michigan, where you are hit also harder because the production work shuts down, and then all small businesses that rely on that food chain of employment and money are starved, and employers automate even more coming out of a recession in manufacturing and production environments because they're trying to cut costs. They're not doing very well, so it drives further automation, further dislocation. Worker skills are they don't have the skills to come back and run the totally now digitized factory or warehouse that they had a job in once. So more people are laid off permanently. More people are in need of updating of their skills for the jobs that will come back and are coming back, new ones, which is sort of the upside. So there's also, state and local governments lose their tax base. I know Pennsylvania and Michigan, we have a lot of different municipalities, sort of differentially ability to raise revenue. If you lost your tax base, you don't have much to bring back, and then your services are cut even more. So we're harder hit too if we don't provide some financial relief for state and local governments to keep them going, and that has long-term effects if your community's degraded, or just is kind of worse off and looks and feels worse off because you can't provide city services. Or Flint's an extreme case; they had no tax base, and then when you try to balance the budget and turn off the right good water and turn on the bad water, it's at least a disaster. So. But on the upside, some of the changes, as I said, we may see more advantage of location for businesses, for small and medium-sized, livable communities where it's easier to socially distance if they're wired, like Marquette, totally. And I know you have some. I was doing some reading. I'm glad you got a community college coming. Education and research institutions are so huge, but pulling in the rural, connecting to the rural areas, connecting everybody, because they've got to be connected if they're going to live and work, have a shot in anything. So that's a real important piece. But we're going to see, we're seeing some evolution of whole industries. I mean, look at who stepped up when we realized, like, we're hostage to China for our PPV and our ventilators. It was the great industrial Midwest and the auto food chain, that started ramping up at scale, because nobody can do it at scale. All of a sudden GM and Ford, and actually Cummins Engine and was partnering with 3M to make ventilators. Tens of thousands of them, and masks. So if we make more of those things and we pull some of our supply chains back domestically, so we don't hostage to a component from China, we're going to see new opportunity to make a bunch of things here, including, they're training little autonomous delivery vehicles as we speak, or robots that are going around. They'll be delivering our food, our COVID tests to our door. It's got to be processed electronically through the IT systems and give you an immediate result. Those are going to be growth, sectors, which are competencies, be able to take an idea, prototype it, develop it, manufacture it in a precision way, and deploy it at scale. Nobody can do that like the Midwest.
Well, and it seems too that, you touched upon the important role government is and will continue to play in this from the local and state level of, if you see the erosion of a tax base, where are you going to be able to continue to fund your municipality? And if you have the opportunity to attract, this has to be, an opportunity to see through the crisis of attracting people to build a bigger tax base and to welcome people into your community and to grow it. So taking a look at this, taking a look at your report, John, what would you say if we had to work through it and sum it up and maybe pull out certain threads as we have for Erie here? What does this mean for a community like Erie, Pennsylvania?
Well, as I said, every community is different. It's different both not only in its leadership, but also kind of its attributes and assets. You gotta, work with what you got that matters. I, tried to do a little homework, and it sounds like I think Erie, there's not one thing for Erie, it appears, that's going to be its answer, not the big innovative employer, not the center of, you don't have a big research university to play off of. So do the combination of things that it sounds like, and all know much more than I do, you're doing. Build around your anchor institutions, your colleges, your bigger employers, and you're getting another one. Community college would be very helpful. Make that downtown, take those older buildings and make it livable, walkable with the kind of amenities and coffee shops and, fill-ins of the old with the new. The communities that are on the Great Lakes, those that have managed to move a kind of strategic waterfront reconnection and development that keeps some of it for enjoyment and access, and some of it for, people want to live, work, and, look at their office or sit at a restaurant on the waterfront. And that's a huge asset. I know you've got, a highway still, that's a challenge because, some places remove their highways. They did in Milwaukee. That's a big play, but it really opened up that magical waterfront and made it be a beautiful place and grew development in downtown. You provide the capital for the small businesses and the entrepreneurs who are doing something new or different. You got to confronting our racial divides and the head on. All of our older industrial cities have these splits in life chances and opportunity by race. And they touch our politics. You're like, what are we going to do? What are we doing to break down these barriers to make sure we're connecting folks? Kids of color get a great education. Communities of color have access to the same or better, but have access to what they need: job training, transportation, housing. How do we work to better integrate our communities? I mean, these are real important challenges in our communities because if we were seeing the effects, COVID just made more vivid. Like, our segregation kills because folks who've been marginalized have to work and live in situations that are much more dangerous and don't get, have the health deficits that because, a lot of environmental and living conditions, have contributed to that, and marginalized economic opportunities. So those are important. You're connecting to your parks and your forts and, those things. You reminded me when I read a little bit, Monroe, Michigan is a similar older industrial city on Lake Erie, right? At the other end of the lake. It's had a big challenge to kind of rehabilitate its downtown and waterfront, but they also, it's a Revolutionary War like battlefield and site, and up the River Raisin, which was toxically polluted. It's an area of concern, the most toxic areas. They've cleaned up that mess and redeveloping that sort of fabric of green and water and fort and historical sites as part of their development plan for their waterfronts and riverfronts. And all those things can work together to contribute to a very attractive community where people will want to be part of that and live in a beautiful, rich quality of life community. And when they bring their talents to you and the folks in your community are finding some new economic activity in some of these emerging areas, then that's when that virtuous circle gets going.
Well, I think that's something that is certainly at play in Erie. We have historical tourism, and we're working on that as an industry. We have a somewhat unique distinction of having a French, British, and American fort all in the same area. Certainly one of the things that Erie has championed for so long is its role in the War of 1812 and building the fleet for the Battle of Lake Erie.
Cool.
Oliver Hazard Perry, Daniel Dobbins, local heroes. Folks love to tell those stories. One of the challenges, though, for us, though, is environmentally based. We're seeing toxic, harmful algal blooms now in our spot on Lake Erie. What are you seeing progressive communities do to address something like that? Because I can't think of having a live, work, and play in this region if something's so toxic. You just mentioned about river cleanup, but what do we see places doing with that? Because I think that's so important. If we don't address it now, what lake might we have? We might have none.
Yeah, and that's really the first step in creating a kind of leveraging your water and waterfronts and water access and enjoyment as an economic development tool. It can't be toxic or, so noxious that you can't even be near it, right? And it's doing damage to the beautiful waters. Our region, I could show you pictures everywhere around the region look the same. These were industrial waterfronts. They're on, and 4 rivers caught on fire, in 1970, not just the Cuyahoga famously, the Buffalo River, the Rouge River outside Detroit, and the Chicago River. And, that began the movement. Maybe this has gone too far. And actually, restoration and cleanup and making, that is, job one in creating a sort of place-based strategy for redevelopment and reconnection of our waters to our community and our waterfronts and the use and enjoyment of them. The water is magical. People want to, see it. They want to walk along it. They want to have their office. They'll pay more for a hotel room. There was a hotel built in Muskegon, Michigan, which was a mess. 40 years ago, Holiday Inn, they built it so the windows didn't face the water because it was such a mess. Which, think about it. Like, how could that possibly? Now, Muskegon has cleaned up their waterfront. They're not doing it as strategically, but the redevelopment. There's a new hotel. There's new brew pubs. There's new marinas. There's new parks. Along the waterfront. Those are all. You can't have toxic, runoff or sewage overflows. That's expensive stuff. That's part of what we actually did succeed in the first Brookings work and making an economic argument for the Great Lakes Restoration Plan that was saying this is not just cleaning up these messes and the toxic areas is not just a nice thing to do for the environment. This is jobs and economic development around the region, and that's what it's proven to be. We got even Obama and McCain were running for office. We were trying to leverage our position as swing states. We made them take the pledge based on this economic impact to clean up, follow through on Great Lakes restoration, and Obama did. And $4 billion have been spent. I don't know if Erie's gotten, there must be something going on there. I don't know if they've gotten a part of that. Ashtabula and some other communities nearby, I know have had big Great Lakes restoration funded cleanup and redevelopment efforts, which are, it's expensive, but it's job one.
And one last audience question before we go here, John. And I think this person is thinking in a line of economic development as well, and right now, and wondering what you've seen in terms of opportunity zones. So Erie has 8 opportunity zones, most of that are concentrated in the downtown. Are you seeing other Rust Belt communities take advantage of this and have wins with them?
I know almost any community that is eligible is trying to take advantage of it in some way. I'm not sure if we're seeing the effect. There's some concern that grew, at the beginning, or after the first excitement. Are we subsidizing, developments that rich people and developers were going to make anyway? Because if we are, then it's not doing anything that wasn't going to happen already. So I don't know of anyone who's can show a big new win. It's not, doesn't make it a bad thing to do. I think what we're arguing for and what we argue for in the Bible, we need more place centric development focusing, resource focusing. Not every region, not every community is in this transition, right? Ann Arbor does not need any help. Madison, Wisconsin, it's going to grow and flourish again when it opens up, and it already was. But places like Erie, the communities in transition, we should focus packages of resources from housing to waterfront redevelopment to business finance on those places that are in transition. That's one of the recommendations we're calling for. And it's getting a lot more appreciation that kind of place-based packages of economic development support for communities that are in this transition would be a better way to spend money. That opportunity zones was an effort at that, but with kind of one dimension. I'm saying we should do this in multiple dimensions. They should have the support for job training and higher education and retraining and business financing and infrastructure development focused on where it could be used as a lever to remake a community.
John, I just want to note the person that asked that question on our Facebook page does agree with you. They've just said that, so they appreciate your answer. That is a great recommendation.
I'm glad of that.
That is a great recommendation from A Vital Midwest, The Path to New Prosperity. I certainly want to encourage folks to go and read it, which can be found at the chicagocouncil.org. You can find it on that website. There's an excellent executive summary to get you started on it. But for folks that may have already read it and need a refresher, or folks who are about to go read it, anything else, John, you want to point to them as key takeaways they should be looking at with this new report from you?
Well, I think when you read it, or if you do read it, and even if you just look at the pictures, it's an honest, hard-headed analysis of where we are in this region, the economy, and where we can go. It's actually optimistic and inspiring, because it does show many examples of how and where in different ways similarly situated communities that had a similar story have found success, and it can be done, and it is being done, and you guys are going to do it too. So, and anything I can do to help, let me know.
We're going to take you up on that. Mr. John Austin, director of the Michigan Economic Center, a non-resident senior fellow at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs and the Brookings Institution, and research fellow at W.E. Updike Institute for Employment Research, and author of A Vital Midwest, The Path to New Prosperity. Thank you so much for taking your time, energy, and efforts, and for sharing them with us here today in this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
And of course, thanks to all of you watching along at home, tuning in live, or catching a later broadcast, streaming this on demand. Thank you for tuning into this program. John, before we go, for folks looking to connect with you to find out more information, I've pointed them to the chicagocouncil.org website. Is there anywhere else we should guide them so they can connect with you and the critical research you're doing?
Yeah, Brookings Institution. I'm through Brookings. I'm also Michigan Economic Center. You can always email me direct, jcaustin@umich.edu.
Fantastic. Thank you, John. And of course, for more information about upcoming JES programming, which you can put on your calendars now, and past programming that you can stream on demand, head over to jesserie.org. There you're also going to find a wide range of publications, including reports, essays, and timely writings, and more. And be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. For the Jefferson Educational Society, I'm Ben Speggen. Be safe, be sound, and thanks for listening and learning with us.